All right, Ariel, we are here for Pints with Air 310, March 10th. We've got another classic product rundown. I hope people don't get tired of this, but I was really excited to talk about this amp because it's a monster. This thing is...
It's a beast.
It is. It's insane. This is another one of those products that hasn't come in super frequently in the last, year or so, and I just haven't had a lot of up close experience with it. But after doing some reading, checking out some pictures, like, oh man, it seems like such a serious amp. But I guess before we get serious about amplifiers, do you want to get serious about beer?
I would love to. It's Friday. It's late on Friday, and I've earned it. So
yes, you have.
So this is actually our second visit to Melvin Brewing in Jackson. A couple of years ago, we did their killer beers. I'm not going to show it here, but I've got a wall of most of the beers we've had before on the show, so I can reference them pretty easily. Anyway, so this is I don't think I've had this one before. I love it. This is HeyZeus. It's a Mexican lager, Mexican style lager, and there's a few breweries, several breweries now doing these Mexican style lagers, and they're really easy drinking. This one has a lot more flavor than a lot of them I've had, and this one I got it last night. I had one last night, and I'm thrilled.
Lagers are not typically my style, but this is, as you said, really easy drinking, really nice. I feel like I should have some lime with it or something.
I've got some in the fridge.
Oh yeah, it tastes like this would be a perfect brew to have a lime with. So yeah, they're up in Wyoming. It looks like they have a really cool brewery and maybe tasting room. There wasn't too many pictures of the inside, and it's too far for me to drive to take pictures, but it looks really cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have been to that brewery. If I'm remembering correctly, they have a restaurant in there. My brother, ex-Ayre employee, also, he used to build all the R series stuff quite a while ago. He's up in Jackson now, and he loves Melvin Brewing, so he has sent me down some stuff from them before, or brings it down when he comes and visits. So I'm big fans of the brewery.
Nice, right on. Well, Melvin, we approve. Well, yeah, so this beast of an amplifier, the V1xe, looks like it came out in 1998 is when it first launched, February of 98.
Sounds about right. I had definitely been up there, so about year and a half or two. And so I actually was there for the entire design processes of it. Wasn't, at that point, still wasn't designing any schematic, although I did find several problems and was involved in getting it working correctly. Like there were some features that were missing and causing a problem, and I was able to identify those. So I definitely hand built every single one of them. Every single solder joint in there was those prototypes. We usually built 2 prototypes. So I think we might have actually built 4 or 5 prototypes of the V1. We're getting big enough, and so I still have one as one of my personal amps. But it was a beast. This thing was a little over 100 pounds total, and it had external heat sinks, and so it was a little bit of a bear to handle because there's sharp heat sinks on the outside trying to carry the thing. I think we actually shipped gloves with it. We had these kind of woven rubber gripped gloves to help people be able to successfully carry it without cutting your hands up.
That's cool. I know I've seen like the little white cotton gloves supplied with gear before, but yeah, as soon as you mentioned gloves and heat sinks, I was picturing like those little grippy rubber protective gloves, and
yep,
that's awesome.
Yeah, so this was, it was the first amp, the V3, was a pretty unique design. Now this was kind of it had some similarities as far as the circuit topology, but it was actually pretty kind of a big shift, but it still had MOSFET output stage, same as the V3. But here we've got, you can see in this photo here, a massive number of parallel output devices, where the V3 only had a single set. So it basically just had 8 times as many output devices. So there are 8 per quadrant of each channel. So there are 64 total output devices in the stereo amp.
Wow.
And so we used, there was this English company that made these particular MOSFETs. They're somewhat geared towards audio. And so everything was Semilab or Magnatech. And so they actually, the parts we ended up using were actually, they were actually sorted for us by them. And so they actually gave them a custom part number. So look at the part number, they actually say AY and then a part number. And so they were actually screened and then actually part numbered for us. So that they matched better than their stock parts. And then we did an additional sort on them and matching after that even. So anyway, yeah, so huge heatsink output stage, big toroid power transformer. And you can see still maintained our choke input power supply. So you see, the ones on top are the obvious chokes, but then the black thing beneath them is actually a potted large choke for the output power supply. And so we potted that in potting as well in a metal can to make sure it stayed as quiet as possible, as well as some radiation shielding. What else is unique about this thing? So the input stage, is, again, it's JFET input. We have parallel JFET devices to reduce noise even more, even though they were the ultra low JFET, ultra low noise JFET devices from Toshiba. And then we have a MOSFET cascode. Into the driver stage, how that worked. It was so that backboard there's, and so again there was double voltage regulation, because this was a 1 series product. So at the time, all the 1 series products featured double regulation. 3 series featured single regulation. We had a big relay, you can see right in the middle there on the power supply board. And so that's a big relay which connected the output, the actual AC to the output power supply. That's where when you went from green to blue, from standby to operate the V1, it's actually switching the AC to the actual output power supply. And so it was in green. The rectifiers weren't even receiving AC power, so it was certainly a bit lower current draw and standby than let's say some of our current amps perhaps. So it was, but that also, that huge relay took some consideration to make sure driving and didn't create noise itself. Now that photo there, you'll see that has the first generation of the power supply board. I forget if it was the E or I think it was the X or the XE. Because remember, you much like the previous product we already talked about, went through a couple generations of upgrades. And so one of the upgrades was replacing that power supply board with a bigger one that had even more capacitance. And so that's the first gen one that has a little less capacitance.
I think I got another picture in here, maybe.
Yeah, that's still the first gen. Yeah, that's one that had that looks like the eyeballs in the mouth, a little bit the nose, mouth there.
Yeah.
Always love that picture.
So this amp compared to V3, did this one have any feedback or completely zero feedback? Because I know the V3 used a little bit of negative feedback, wasn't it? Didn't we use a little bit of feedback in the V3?
Not to my knowledge, no. I don't think it, not my, and so this the V1 absolutely did not.
Right.
There's zero feedback whatsoever. And so I'm pretty certain the V3 had zero feedback whatsoever.
That might have been one of those things that I read in a stereo file that I'll have to go back and reread. Looks like after Michael Fremer did the K3 that I had mentioned in last week's video, it looks like this was one of the next products from us that he reviewed. So he went straight from K3 to V1. And I mean, this kind of had all of the Ayre hallmark sound at the time, with like that tube like kind of sound, but still all the fast kind of immediacy of solid state, and just pretty unique for the time, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it had, as far as kind of American muscle amp, as I kind of call them, there were several at the time. So this kind of fit in that mold a little bit. It's big. It's rated at 200 watts. It's big and heavy. But the other thing I'll point out at this, because this was MOSFET output stage, and so this is one. Because one of the key design aspects of a power amp is the bias of the output stage. And so in a MOSFET design, almost universally, the higher the bias, the better it's going to sound. But with that higher bias, you get higher heat. And so especially with an amp like this, where you have exposed heat sinks, you have to balance those things, because you can't have unsafe temperature exposed exposed casework that is, I think the limit is about 125 degrees, which actually sounds pretty high, but 125 degrees is about the limit where you can hold your hand or fingers on it for a few seconds before it starts feeling uncomfortable that you want to take them off. That's about the limit. So we definitely shoot for cooling. Now we don't want the natural temperature to be quite that. I shoot for about like 115. I know we had some employee amplifiers where they like to juice them up a little bit, so bump the bias up a little bit and live with the higher temperature.
I wonder who that could have been. Gary.
Yes, we call it the GM800. Well, no, that was actually the V3. We had the GM. It was referred to the GM800 for GM for Gary Moeller, and then 800 for the amount of bias current. I think the standard for the V3 was 700, and he liked to juice his to 800.
Very cool. Well, he's got some good ears, so I'm sure that whatever he was doing with that made sense.
And some of the best ears that I know. Yeah.
We'll have to get Gary on here soon too. We've got too many good friends that we need to invite on here. We should just get them all on at the same time.
Now we need to spread them out. It'd be too much. We'd have to way too long of an episode to have them all on.
Yeah,
got too much to talk about.
A lot of cooks in the kitchen at that rate too.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of small details about the amp. One of the I'll divulge some of the pains of this amp. Particularly in shipping. we used to use these laminated cardboard inserts for the shipping inserts, and you know, unfortunately, towards the rear of the amp, where the fin was slightly exposed in shipping, you know, often the cardboard would squish enough that it would actually press against those fins, and it's like the last fin would often fold in a little bit. And so we have become experts at fixing those heat sinks, kind of bending them back into place, so they look correct and it doesn't look ugly.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised to see it in 1990s money. It sold for 7,500. So I mean, today that's like 14,000 or something. So it was a pretty pretty serious amp back then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so there's plenty of debate as far as MOSFET versus bipolar output stage, and they both have their place. We've definitely switched to bipolar
Right.
for the last several amps, but there's something special about the MOSFET. It's a different sound. There's different design constraints, but there are some advantages to them. That's an amazing amp. Mine's been sitting, haven't been using it lately. I think I actually lent some parts from it to repair our unit, because we were having some long delays in getting some service parts. So I don't think I've rebuilt mine at this point. So I need to rebuild mine. But I know that there are this amp. There are plenty of fans of this amp, including plenty of it was in a few mastering studios that I know of. I know locally we were found that use them. Particularly, it was a big benefit in the early days of the DSD era, because I know many amps at the time with the higher frequency noise that came with the early days of DSD. Many amps could not handle it, and they would shut down or they would fail. And V1 handled it beautifully, and so it's real that. And I know a good friend of ours, Bruce Spotnick, he has 5 of them in his studio.
Oh, Bruce.
Yeah, for his 5-channel system that he bi-amps. So there's one V1 bi-amping 5 speakers each in a system.
Yeah, that room must get toasty.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. No, Bruce is he's a name for sure in the audio engineering world. That was a name that I was familiar with when I was going to school back in Hollywood, down in Musicians Institute.
Yep. Yeah. So because he had 5, and so one of our major upgrades, he wanted to have them upgraded. So it was very daunting to try and have all 5 shipped here. So I actually flew out there and finished, spent a day and a half in his studio and upgraded all 5 of them on his floor.
That's service.
Yeah,
that's cool.
That was almost 20 years ago. But.
Yeah, so yeah, it looks like it followed a lot of the same like power supply stuff as the V3, but just took it to the next level, being a V1.
Yeah.
And it started as V1, and then it eventually turned into V1X.
It became the V1X, and then we did the V1xe. Yep. So the X upgrade, and then the Evolution upgrade. Yeah, and don't ask me to describe what each of them exactly was right now. I could look it up, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And so again, one of the other differences, and this is similar to the K1 versus the K3, where the V1 used a special high-speed circuit board material, where the V3 K3 did not, and the K1 V1 used a special, more expensive, high-speed circuit board material.
high speed circuit board material was kind of a new thing for me when I came into Air. Would you want to elaborate on that for maybe those who, like me, weren't too hip to it?
Yeah, yeah. And so, the fact that we call it high speed doesn't really apply to the way we use it, but that type of material was more commonly used in more like RF and as well as high speed digital circuits that were where that mattered. There are certain parameters of the board material that mattered to certain industries, and that major feature was that it was a higher bandwidth, but it was able to to support higher frequency signals as far as its impedance characteristics. And so now for as far as audio use, that factor alone did not matter to us, but it came with other mechanical properties as well as electrical properties that did benefit audio. The fact that it was high speed had nothing to do with the way we used it. That's just what was more commonly referred to in the wider PCB industry.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, 95 pounds, 18 inches by 20 inches by 7.5. Huge thing. Yeah, I tried to dig up some more notes on it before, but I think we kind of covered a lot of it. I mean, yeah, we still update these, we still service these. I mean, again, this is another one that I have not seen in for any reason other than maybe a recap or an upgrade. But I mean, I'm sure many of them that are out in the wild have been going since day one, probably.
Yeah, a lot of them. It was definitely again a very reliable amp, and even in the early days, I think it was. I don't remember a lot of them coming back. Yeah, and I think I was helping out in production there too, so I'm pretty sure at least the first 20, I hand built entirely. I was kind of supplementing the production team at that point. So
yes,
I remember, and yeah, I think I remember prepping like before we had some of the circuit boards in. I had 20 of the chassis, heat sinks, and transformers and stuff pre-built, ready on the shelf, and we got the boards in, stuffed them. So yeah, I was very intimate with that, with the build process of those.
Was this like kind of the Air reference amp for a while? Was this kind of
Oh
like,
yeah, the 1 series was intended to be kind of our like our what we're gonna call it, the reference or statement, like our top of the line series.
That would make sense. Yeah, so it looks like I just pulled up some of the notes. It looks like 2000 is when we did the air conditioner change to the power supply, and then just a year later we added capacitance. Or no, I'm sorry. In 2000 we increased capacitance and added the air conditioner.
Okay.
And then 2001 capacitors were added as a rework to the power supply. There was a bunch of stuff done like a year later, and then the dynamic power update came in 2004. Yep. So we added more capacitance, it looks like, across the AC line. Oh, it was the capacitor on the AC line circuit breaker that we had added there for more filtration and protection there. But yeah, I mean, just trying to help jog your memory, I guess, if there's anything else fun in between those major updates that we're not thinking of.
No, those, yeah, I mean, it was largely pretty much, again, here, most of the upgrades at that time were power related, either on the AC filtering side or on the DC power supply side. I remember changing faster. One of the big ones was actually changing out the actual power supply board for a much bigger one, held a bunch of extra capacitance. we had an unintentional upgrade to it, because originally a power supply board did not use the special circuit board material, and so we were not intending to, but then the board house accidentally made a batch with the special board material, and we didn't realize it at first, and then we realized, and then we couldn't go backwards, so we had to keep it, and that was kind of part of one of the upgrades in the end.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Richard. No,
No.
was that not QSC?
No, the actual raw board, which is not QSC.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. Yeah,
The raw board material.
blessing in disguise, I think. That's probably what it was.
Yes. Yeah, it was an improvement because like once we realized, we actually went back and compared the old board to the new board material, even though it was just a power supply, and it absolutely made a difference. It was a noticeable improvement, which is sometimes annoying when you don't want it to make a difference, and it does, but you learn something there too, because everything matters, no matter how far upstream you think it is and shouldn't matter. It matters. It makes a difference,
Right, it's part of our continual evolution and just further understanding of all of our stuff. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I can't think of any other questions that I've got on it, unless you got fun Charlie stories around it, but no, it's just a really cool piece. I mean, it's definitely the gaudiest amp that we've made that I can see that's at least hit production.
Well,
wink wink.
yeah, in a way, yeah. So like you can't see it very well here, but the power transformer there, that thing is a monster. I think it's a 35-pound
This thing here,
toroid. Yeah, I mean, it's mostly hidden by the power supply board. I think that thing alone is 35 pounds. It's a monster. Yeah, no, I don't remember any great Charlie stories about this one. There's, boy, I forget. I remember there was a kind of a companion product. I forget if it was right before the V1 or right after, where we were, and it was basically a mono block version of the V1. And so it was the same circuitry. We were going to call it the M1. Basically the exact same topology and everything. There's one prototype pair in existence. I won't say where they are right now, but they we were trying some experiments with a different technology of rectifiers, and that one was fun because the first time we powered it up, they literally exploded, and so we had to duck and cover, shrapnel flying, rectifiers literally exploding.
Rectifiers. I was thinking caps for some reason, but
no, the rectifiers, they they go into kind of a thermal runaway. There's a certain technology spacing it might have been silicon carbide or something. But if you overuse them a little bit, they go into thermal runaway very fast, and they literally exploded. So I remember getting pelted by bits of plastic bodied rectifiers.
well, it's not fun if there's not a little bit of danger involved, right?
Right. Yeah. We I think there was one V1. I forget if we had the voltage wrong or something, but that huge bank of capacitance, there was a capacitor that failed, And when those large capacitors fail, they often they start spewing the hot electrolyte, and which is also very corrosive. And so I remember coming in one morning, and our burn-in room was full of smoke and smelled awful. Like we had some protection in place, so it shut off, but that was a mess. We had a whole power supply board meltdown.
Actually, you just made me think of something else that I had read. Maybe you can expand on it a little bit, but it seemed like there was kind of a unique way to monitor DC in the amp. Like there was no microprocessor to control it or monitor it, is what I was reading.
Oh, well, yeah. So the V1 was the first amp we had DC detection, DC fault detection. And so if it detected more than plus or minus 1 volt of DC out at the speaker posts, it would shut off. And so the V3 didn't have it, but the V1, and as well as every power amp since that we've done, has DC fault detection. And so yeah, and so the V1 also had no microprocessor, so all of the controls, kind of similar to the V1K3, had kind of a power up timer, so it would be in standby for about 60 or so seconds. So come up in red, go to green, and then again had a push button, a very small push button in the front to go between green and blue, operate and standby. And but it was all glue logic again, and it also had remote control, which was for a power amp, was somewhat unique at the time. Many power amps did not have remote control, but again, it's just go between standby and on. There aren't many functions there, and that's when we changed that remote control to have the 4th button specifically for the V1. But into that logic board, we also had that DC detection, so that if there was too much DC, it would protect your speakers by shutting off and basically removing power from the output stage.
That's cool. And so yeah, like all of our stuff these days does that, but it's got like a little logic board that kind of monitors all that now, huh?
Yeah, which is more or less the same here, just that it was, it was all glue logic based instead of firmware and microprocessor based.
Mm-hmm. See, I thought of something else we didn't talk about. Well, yeah, I think that's maybe all I can think of for now. We'll have to dig some more stories out of Clay maybe, and we can add those in later. But yeah, I just after our last episode, I was like, well, we've done V3 and K1 and K3. Now let me check out the V1, and it was actually this picture when I first saw it. I was like, oh my gosh, it's a serious piece of tech. So I was really wanting to do this one.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great amp.
Well, I think that'll do it for me for today. But we're moving along through our product history. We're gonna get some really cool news stories, I'm sure, as we get closer to those ones that you worked on more intimately. And I want to get into the modern stuff that I'm more familiar with, so I'm not just listening to you teach me about it.
Right.
And, we'll bring a lot of cool new stories coming up here soon. But thank you everyone for hanging out with us. I'm already out, but still cheers to y'all. And next Friday we'll have another episode. Maybe we're cleaning our podcast studio right now. As you saw a couple weeks ago, we got some tools to put in that podcast studio, but we are still in the process of dressing it up and making it awesome. So soon enough, we'll have a whole new background and whole new scenery. But until then, we're going to keep doing these fun Zoom meetings, and I can have my virtual backgrounds. Right on. Well, thanks for joining us. Cheers, y'all.
Cheers.
Good night.